You are watching the 9.2 lesson video on univariate data, quartiles, and box plots. So in 9.1, we were talking about some of the more basic types of ways to show our univariate data, our one variable data. Here we're just adding another layer onto this, and we call these box plots, or sometimes box and whisker plots. So the first thing that I wanted to point out is really what it's going to look like. And you should have seen these before in the past. You might just not have constructed them in the past, but that's what we're going to do today. So our box plot looks like this. We have a minimum value, a maximum value, we have our first quartile, our third quartile, and our median. And it represents in each one of these four sections, and when I say one of the four sections, so 1, 2, 3, 4, each one of those four sections represents 25% of the data because it takes the minimum and maximum and divides that in half. That's how we get our median. So that's why 50% of the data would be to the left of that and 50% would be to the right. Then when we have our quartiles, our first quartile and third quartile, we're just dividing the data again into half, and we're only looking at the bottom 50% of the data, so that's why we'll see the 25% on either one of the sides. Let's see this in action in exercise number 1. It gives us the ages of 15 employees of the Red Hook Curry House. And what we need to do is find these values, the minimum, the maximum, the median, the first and third quartile. Well, the great part about the data that we are given is that they listed it in order for us, which is perfect. That helps me to easily see that the minimum is 16 and the maximum is 44. The next thing that I always find is the median, and I'm just going to count in the same number on either side. And the reason why, again, we can do this is because the data is arranged already from smallest to biggest. I'm left with 26. Sometimes I use my fingers. I can't do that when I'm showing it on the screen, so I'm going to just use my mouse and put dots. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the lower half of the data and find the middle value of that data, which happens to be 18. That's what we call the first quartile. I'm going to do the same thing with my upper half of the data. So starting with the 29 and 44, I'm going to work my way in to see that the third quartile is at 37. Once you've found these 5 values, what we're going to do is create our own box plot. So this is where using a straight edge is also important, but the first thing that we need to make sure of is that we range our values from 15 or actually 16 all the way to 44. I thought it was best to count by 5s, so here you can see that I've just evenly spaced out the best that I can. No one's going to be going and measuring, but just try to make sure that each of the sections are exactly the same. The next thing that I personally like to do is just put the points where each of the values are supposed to be. So here is my minimum at 16. Here is my first quartile at 18. Oops, let's try that again. There's 18. And then 26 will be my median. 37 is going to be my third quartile, and 44 is going to be my maximum. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a straight edge and just connect all of these points, just with a line. Because the next piece that I need to do is draw perpendicular lines, which are going to be my min, max, median, all that jazz at each one of those points. So there's a line, there's another line, and we're going to do this for all 5 of our points. I should also mention that I'm always using something that's erasable because I'm going to do a little bit of erasing in a minute. And I apologize for my values not being totally exact, but you get the picture. Okay, so now I've created all these values. The last thing that we actually have to do is create the box, which is right in the middle. That connects our third quartile to our first quartile. And as you can see, I have some stray lines kind of hanging around, so I'm going to remove them. I definitely don't need this in the middle anymore. I can get rid of that. I can erase that, and just some of the stray ends that I had here. Just clean it up, make it look nice and pretty. And there you have it. Our box and whisker plot, or the box plot, is complete. Moving on to exercise number 2, what we can see here is that 45 of Mrs. Ruscio's students reported how many grams of sugar they ate during one day. And the results of this data are shown in the following box and whisker diagram. So they actually have collected the data and organized it for us in 2 different box plots, one being the female box plot and one being the male box plot. So all we need to do now is answer the questions that follow. So A is asking, what was the median daily intake of sugar for both boys and girls? So remember, the median is what we find as this middle value here, the middle value of the box. So it looks like the girls is 50, where the boys is 80. Comparing the minimum for the boys and the girls, we can see that the males, the minimum of the males is 30, where the females was 15. C asks us what was the third quartile, and remember the third quartile is this top value here of the box. So the females 80, where the males was 135. It's pretty clear that most of the, or actually all the values for the girls are smaller than the values for the boys. All right, we're going to have to do some flipping back and forth because exercise 2 is continued on to the next page. And D asks us, were there any outliers in this data? So if we scooch back, we can see, yes, look at these outliers right here. They existed in the males category. So yes, in the males. And E says, what percent of girls consumed between 25 and 80 grams of sugar? Okay, so let's go back to the box plot. So we're looking at the females, and it is asking between 25 and 80. So that is quartile 1 to quartile 3. So how much of the data is that? Well, remember, each one of these sections here is 25%. So 25% plus 25% would give us a total of 50%. So that's saying that 50%, or half of the girls' data, is falling between 25 and 80 grams of sugar intake. F asks how many girls consumed between 25 and 80 grams of sugar. Okay, well, wait a minute. We know that 50% of the girls had this, but how many girls were interviewed? Does it even tell us? And now I'm reading the question, and they did not give us this information. So you know what? We'll modify this question for us. Let's say, okay, 45 of Mrs. Ruscio's students. Let's keep it simple. Let's say that there were, I don't know, let's see, 25 males and 20 females. Okay, so we just had to change the question a little bit in order to answer this. So if there were 20 females, that means we need to find 50% of 20. In other words, half of 20, which would be 10. All right, heading on to G. It says the World Health Organization recommends that women have a maximum of 24 grams of sugar per day and men have a maximum of 36 grams per day. How does your data compare to these recommendations? Oh, this is not looking good. So 24 for girls, 36 for boys. Yikes. So basically, the females are a little bit more in line, but the males definitely have gone and surpassed that recommendation. So our data is much higher. Basically, stop eating so much sugar, kids. All right, let's move on to exercise number 3. Looks like we have a table of the hours of sleep of 45 of Mrs. Ruscio's students during a 24-hour period on a school day. And they ask us some questions about this data. So they want to know the minimum. So the minimum is 3 hours. The maximum is 12 hours. Let's find the range. Well, the range would be 12 minus 3, which is 9-hour range. D then asks us, what is the median of this data set? Okay, so if I wanted to find the median, I could go ahead and just list out all of the numbers. I don't necessarily have to do that though, because what I can do is just use the frequency to help me. So if I start from both ends, I'll take away the first value, second value. I'm taking away 3 here, so I have to take away 1, 2, 3 there. Do you see what I just did? And then 5 and 3 is 8, 8 there, 8 there. Now this is where things are going to get a little tricky, but if we think about this in a more conceptual way, you're going to realize if I take away 4 here, and I take away 4 there, I'm really left with 2. So regardless, we will end up seeing that median fall in the 7-hour range. Because if I take away 2 here and take away 2 there, I'm going to be left with 7 still in the 7 category. Now, E and F want us to find both the first and third quartile. The way that we would have to do this, I think, is a little bit trickier than what we would typically have to do to find the median. So I wanted to show you how your calculator can actually do this for you. The first thing that we're going to do is we'll add a page, and we are going to add lists and spreadsheets, so 4. And we only need to type in at the top of this column, let's say the hours. You could label it sleep, whatever you want is fine. So we'll label it hours, and then we're going to skip the equals line, and I am going to type in literally every single value in each cell. So 3, 4.5, I have to list out 3 5s because of the frequency of 3, and so on and so forth. Please do this now on your own. All right, so I just typed in all of my data. A couple things that I want you to be mindful of are, first of all, that there were 45 students, so I should have ended in the 45 column, or in the 45, 45, I guess you would call that the 45 or the 45th term in this column. The last thing that you should always remember to do is press enter. So I don't ever want my cursor to be on the number because the calculator doesn't read that to be a value. Okay, so we're done with that. Control, add a page, and we're going to add a calculator. Hop on into your menu, and we have been so used to going into the algebra section, but we're not really doing algebra anymore. We're doing some statistics. So let's pick 6 and we need to do some calculations. So 1. What we want to do is figure out one variable, univariate statistics. So press 1, number of lists, we'll say 1, which is okay. And what we have to do is pick our list from the menu, which is ours. So what you can see here is this magic that just happened. Your calculator calculated everything for you. It told us our minimum, our maximum, our median, we were right. But then it tells us our 6 for quartile 1 and our 8 for quartile 3. So it lists all of this information there for you. And you can use this at any point in time. We actually could have used this at the very beginning of the question. I just didn't show you yet. All right, pause the video, create your box plot. And here's my example. So you can see the minimum is at 3, the max is at 12, the median is at 7. It's a little crooked, but you get the picture. 6 is my first quartile, and 8 is my third quartile.